Welcome everyone. Leave here in the comments where you are talking about. And now, let's get started. The January wind whipped through the narrow streets of Beacon Hill as I made my way home from another long shift at Massachusetts General Hospital, 3 years into my residency. And the crushing weight of 80-hour weeks had slowly eroded what remained of my social life. My name is Sarah Chen, and at 29, I was living what looked like the perfect Boston life. A tiny but charming apartment near Charles Street, a prestigious medical career, and a close-knit group of fellow residents who had become like family. But beneath the surface of career success lay a growing loneliness that even the busiest hospital shifts couldn't map. My last relationship had ended 2 years ago, crumbling under the pressure of my residency schedule and his growing resentment of always coming second to my patients. The dating scene in Boston's medical community was incestuous at best. Everyone had either dated each other or knew too much about each other's dating history. The suggestion to try Hinge came from my best friend and fellow resident, Maya, during one of our rare nights off at Drink in Fort Point. Seriously, Sarah, the old-school meeting people at bars thing is dead. Plus, you can actually filter for people who understand crazy medical schedules. She wasn't wrong. Trying to explain to civilians why I might have to cancel plans last minute due to an emergency surgery was getting old. Growing up in a traditional Chinese-American family in Brookline had instilled a certain skepticism about meeting people online. My mother still hoped I'd meet someone through the endless parade of family friends' sons she tried to introduce me to at various dim sum gatherings. But after another Sunday afternoon of dodging questions about my love life at Empire Garden, I finally downloaded Hinge. Creating my profile felt like crafting a medical school application. Every photo carefully chosen to show different facets of my life. One in scrubs, but make it cute. One hiking the White Mountains, one at a friend's wedding, and one enjoying dim sum with my family. I debated whether to mention being a doctor in my profile, knowing it could attract the wrong kind of attention, but ultimately decided on a vague healthcare professional. The first few weeks were a parade of uninspiring matches. Finance bros from the seaport who couldn't understand why I couldn't meet for after-work drinks at 5 p.m. Tech guys from Kendall Square who seemed more interested in my Harvard med connection than me. And visiting academics who'd be gone in a semester. I was about to delete the app when his profile appeared. James Sullivan, 32. Biotechnology researcher at MIT. Photos that showed a genuine smile rather than carefully curated gym shots. His prompt responses were thoughtful, rather than trying too hard to be clever. When he mentioned doing research on innovative trauma care, I felt that spark of genuine interest for the first time since downloading the app. Our first messages were about a shared favorite coffee shop in Brookline, Cafe Fix. He knew the owner's name and my favorite obscure pastry. It felt like finally meeting someone who spoke the same language, who understood both the medical world and the specific rhythm of Boston life. When he mentioned living in the South End, it seemed like perfect synchronicity. Our conversations flowed effortlessly from professional interests to personal stories. James had grown up in Worcester, spent time working in California's biotech industry, but returned to Boston because, as he put it, nowhere else feels like home. He shared stories about his Irish Catholic family that felt comfortingly familiar. Different cultural background, but the same emphasis on family, education, and achievement. We discovered more connections. He had done his postdoc at MAR, knew some of the attending physicians I worked with, and even participated in research projects I had read about. His Instagram showed a life that seemed to perfectly complement mine. Photos of hiking trails I loved, local restaurants I had been meaning to try, and scientific conferences where we might have crossed paths. After 2 weeks of increasingly engaging conversations, we made plans to meet at committee in the seaport. It was close enough to both our workplaces but far enough from Mach that I wouldn't run into colleagues. He suggested the spot, remembering I had mentioned loving Mediterranean food, and made a reservation for 7 p.m. on a Thursday, accommodating my post-round schedule. Committee was buzzing with its usual Thursday night crowd. Young professionals unwinding after work, the smell of oregano and grilled meat in the air, wine glasses clinking against the industrial chic backdrop. I arrived 5 minutes early, characteristic doctor's punctuality, and found him already seated at a corner table with a perfect view of Boston Harbor. In person, James was exactly as his photos suggested, tall with kind eyes behind wireframe glasses, and that same genuine smile. He stood when I approached, revealing a well-fitted blazer over a casual button-down. "I remember you mentioned loving their octopus dish," he said as I sat down, having already ordered a starter that was indeed one of my favorites. The conversation flowed as naturally as it had online, but with an added layer of chemistry that surprised me. He asked thoughtful questions about my residency, shared fascinating details about his research, and demonstrated an impressive knowledge of Boston's medical community. When he mentioned specific surgeons I worked with, it felt like confirmation that our worlds were meant to intersect. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of carefully planned dates around my schedule. James was incredibly understanding of last-minute cancellations due to emergencies, sometimes showing up at the hospital with coffee just as my shift ended. He seemed to know exactly when I needed support and when I needed space to focus on work. It was during a rare weekend off, as we walked through the public garden, that I first noticed something odd. He mentioned a specific patient case I had worked on, details I was certain I hadn't shared with him. When I questioned it, he smoothly explained that one of the attending physicians must have mentioned it, but something felt off. More inconsistencies began to surface. He would know about changes in my schedule before I told him. My colleagues mentioned seeing him around Muck on days we hadn't planned to meet. Instagram photos I hadn't shared with him became topics of conversation. The cognitive dissonance between his perfect boyfriend behavior and these unsettling details grew stronger. The breaking point came during a night shift in the air. A colleague mentioned that someone had been accessing patient records from various hospital computers. Nothing specific to my patients, but enough to trigger an internal investigation. The timing corresponded with occasions I had seen James in the hospital. My attempt to subtly question him about his hospital access led to the first crack in his carefully constructed facade. His explanation about consulting on cases became defensive, then angry. When I pressed further, mentioning the IT investigation, his entire demeanor changed. The warm smile disappeared, replaced by something cold and calculating. That night, my hospital login credentials were used to access dozens of patient files, except I was in surgery when I returned home. My apartment showed subtle signs of entry, nothing missing, but things slightly out of place. My heart nearly stopped when I found a stolen hospital ID badge hidden in my coat pocket, one that would give someone full access to restricted areas. The truth unraveled quickly after I reported the badge to hospital security. James Sullivan's MIT credentials were fake. His supposed research position didn't exist. The real horror lay in what we discovered. He had been stalking female medical residents across multiple Boston hospitals, using stolen credentials and manufactured identities to integrate himself into their lives. The confrontation happened in the MA parking garage, as I left a late shift with security secretly monitoring. He was waiting by my car, no longer bothering to maintain the charming facade. "You should have just trusted me," he said, his voice eerily calm. "We could have had something real," when hospital security approached. He tried to convince them I was having a mental breakdown from overwork. The ensuing scene revealed the full extent of his obsession. His phone contained thousands of photos of me and other residents, tracking our movements, our schedules, our lives. He had created an entire false identity based on carefully gathered information about what would appeal to medical professionals looking for understanding partners. The legal aftermath was exhausting. Restraining orders, criminal charges, and the discovery of similar cases in other cities. The hospital improved security protocols, but the feeling of violation lingered in every corridor. Some of the other victims reached out, and we formed an unexpected support network. Sharing our stories and helping each other heal, I transferred to a different MAR location, unable to walk the same halls that held so many memories of his deception. The hardest part was rebuilding trust, not just in potential partners, but in my own judgment. How had I, trained to observe and diagnose, missed so many red flags? A year later, I still take different routes home, check my rearview mirror more often than necessary, and have trouble trusting new connections. But I'm healing, slowly. The experience changed how I interact with patients who share similar stories, giving me a deeper understanding of the trauma of stalking and betrayal. The Boston medical community is smaller than most people realize, and word spread quickly. My story became a cautionary tale in resident safety meetings, leading to new protocols for badge access and background checks for hospital visitors. Sometimes walking past Committee or Cafe Fix, I still feel a chill, not just from the bitter Boston wind, but from the memory of how thoroughly someone can fabricate a life that fits perfectly into your own. It's been 18 months since I last saw James, or whatever his real name is. Every time I pass the public garden, I'm reminded of how close I came to something much worse. If you're using dating apps in Boston, remember, the medical community might seem safe and insulated, but danger can hide behind the most carefully crafted credentials. The rain fell steadily against the windows of my Yaletown apartment, creating that quintessential Vancouver backdrop that tourists hate, but locals find oddly comforting. As a freelance graphic designer specializing in brand identity for tech startups, I'd carved out a comfortable niche in the city's booming tech scene. My name is Maya Patel, and at 27, I was living what many would consider the millennial dream, working remotely, making good money, and enjoying the perfect balance of urban lifestyle and outdoor adventure that only Vancouver could offer. But the same flexibility that allowed me to work from anywhere also meant I spent too many hours alone, crafting logos and website mock-ups in coffee shops along Main Street or my home office overlooking False Creek. My last relationship had ended when my ex took a job in Toronto, neither of us believing in long distance. After a year of focusing on building my client base, my best friend Lisa convinced me it was time to get back out there. The Vancouver dating scene was notoriously difficult, a city full of people who seemed more interested in hiking the grouse grind or training for their next marathon than forming real connections. The men I met through friends were either married to their startups or couldn't commit to plans more than 24 hours in advance, always waiting for a better option to come along. Growing up in an Indian family in Surrey had made me somewhat skeptical of dating apps. But as Lisa pointed out during one of our walks around the seawall, times had changed. Even my younger cousin had met her husband on Bumble, so, one rainy Sunday afternoon, over a bowl of ramen at Maritama, I finally downloaded Tinder. Creating my profile felt like designing a brand identity for myself. Every element carefully curated to tell a story, photos that showcased my creative side, one at my desk during a client meeting, another hiking in, one at a gallery opening in Gastown, and one enjoying dim sum with friends in Richmond. I debated how much to share about my career, knowing that freelance sometimes raised eyebrows, but decided to be upfront about it. The first wave of matches was predictable. Tech bros from downtown showing off Tesla keys, wannabe influencers looking for free design work, and outdoor enthusiasts whose profiles were nothing but skiing photos from Whistler. I was about to give up when his profile appeared. Alex Chen, no relation to my family's Chens, would later joke. 31. Environmental scientist working on sustainable urban development, with photos that showed depth rather than superficial lifestyle shots. His bio mentioned a perfect mix of professional passion and personal interests, including a line about searching for Vancouver's best xiaolong bao that made me smile. Our first messages revolved around a shared love for the hidden gems of Vancouver's food scene. He knew about the secret menu at Phnom Penh and had strong opinions about the best banh mi on Victoria Drive. It felt like connecting with someone who truly understood the cultural tapestry that made Vancouver special. Our conversations evolved naturally from food to deeper topics. Alex had grown up in Melbourne but moved to Vancouver for his master's degree at UBC and never left. His work involved collaborating with the city on green infrastructure projects, and his passion for sustainability aligned perfectly with Vancouver's eco-conscious culture. His Instagram showed an authentic life that resonated with mine. Photos of community gardens he helped develop, local art exhibitions, and hiking trails that weren't just the typical Instagram spots. He seemed to know Vancouver in a way that went beyond tourist attractions and trendy restaurants. After 2 weeks of engaging conversations, we planned to meet at Cafe Medina for brunch. He suggested it, knowing my love for their lavender lattes, and managed to get us on the wait list at a reasonable time. Already showing more thoughtfulness than most matches, Cafe Medina was buzzing with its usual weekend energy, the smell of waffles and coffee filling the air, the happy chatter of people willing to wait an hour for the city's best brunch. I arrived right on time to find Alex already there, dressed casually but well in a way that screamed conscious consumer rather than fashion victim. In person, Alex was even more engaging than online. He spoke passionately about his latest project, creating green spaces in the downtown east side that would serve both environmental and community needs. He asked thoughtful questions about my work, showing genuine interest in the creative process behind brand development. The conversation flowed so naturally that we decided to continue our date with a walk around Gastown, eventually ending up at Revolver for coffee. He knew the baristas by name and had interesting stories about the neighborhood's development that went beyond the usual tourist facts. The following weeks were filled with perfectly planned dates that showed an intimate knowledge of the city. Alex seemed to know about every new restaurant opening, every community event, and every hidden viewpoint. He took me to places I'd never discovered despite living here for years, but gradually, things began to feel off. He would mention running into my clients at events I hadn't told him about, He knew about meetings I had scheduled before I mentioned them. At first, I attributed it to Vancouver's small creative community. But the coincidences started piling up. Small comments began to reveal inconsistencies in his stories. His supposed office in the LEED-certified building downtown didn't exist. People who should have known about his environmental projects had never heard of them. Yet every time I felt doubt creeping in, he would do something so thoughtful and seemingly sincere that I questioned my own suspicions. The turning point came during a client meeting at Revolver. The barista who had seemed to know Alex so well had no recollection of him when I mentioned him. When I casually brought this up later, his explanation was oddly defensive and led to our first real argument. That night, I received a concerning email from a client about someone trying to access their branding materials using my credentials. The access attempts had come from various coffee shops around the city, places where Alex and I had worked together on our laptops. My professional reputation was at stake. A deeper dive into his social media revealed that many of his photos were geocoded from Melbourne, not Vancouver, despite supposedly being taken locally. His LinkedIn profile had disappeared completely. The truth emerged like a fog lifting over English Bay. Alex's environmental scientist credentials were fabricated. His supposed government contracts didn't exist. The real horror was discovering that he had been using my professional connections and client meetings to gather information for a sophisticated identity theft operation, targeting creative professionals in Vancouver's tech scene. The confrontation happened at Granville Island, where I agreed to meet him one last time with police officers waiting nearby. His calm demeanor cracked when I presented evidence of his fraudulent activities. "You don't understand," he said, his Australian accent suddenly less pronounced. "Vancouver's tech scene is full of opportunities for people who know how to take them." The police intervention revealed a laptop full of stolen identities, credit card numbers, and professional credentials. He had been running similar schemes in other cities, targeting freelancers and creative professionals who often worked in public spaces and had access to valuable client data. The aftermath was a nightmare of security audits, client notifications, and legal proceedings. The Vancouver creative community rallied around me, sharing their own experiences and helping strengthen security protocols for freelancers. I learned I wasn't his first target, but I was determined to be his last. I moved my office to a co-working space in Mount Pleasant. No longer comfortable working in public cafes, my client contracts now included stringent security protocols, and I became an advocate for digital safety in Vancouver's freelance community. Speaking at creative meetups about my experience helped others protect themselves from similar schemes. It's been 2 years since the incident, and I still catch myself scanning coffee shops for familiar faces, wondering if someone is watching too closely. The Vancouver tech scene is smaller than it seems, and word spread quickly. My story became a cautionary tale at creative industry events, leading to better awareness of security risks among freelancers. Every time I pass Cafe Medina or walk through Gastown, I'm reminded of how vulnerability can hide in plain sight. If you're using dating apps in Vancouver, remember, the creative community might seem tight-knit and safe, but some people study that community just to exploit it. The same things that make our city special, its openness, creativity, and collaborative spirit, can also make us targets. These days, I still use dating apps, but with new wisdom. Vancouver's dating scene hasn't gotten any easier, but I've learned that the perfect profile and local knowledge can sometimes be too good to be true in a city built on reinvention. It's important to remember that not all new beginnings are what they seem. The autumn rain painted Shoreditch's brick walls with a glossy sheen as I hurried from the underground station to my flat. Another late night at the gallery behind me. I'm Emma Watson. Yes, like the actress. And no, not related. 25, assistant curator at a contemporary art gallery in East London, living what appeared to be the quintessential young professional London life. My small but stylish flat in a converted warehouse space perfectly matched my artistic career and embodied that industrial chic aesthetic that had drawn me to East London in the first place. After graduating from Central St. Martin's 2 years ago, I'd managed to land my dream job curating emerging artists' exhibitions. The London art scene was everything I'd hoped for. Dynamic, challenging, and constantly evolving. But the same qualities that made it exciting professionally made it incredibly difficult personally. Everyone was always networking, always on, making genuine connections rare and authentic relationships even rarer. My last relationship had ended 6 months ago, a casualty of the London art world's competitive nature. Dating another curator had seemed perfect until we found ourselves competing for the same position. The aftermath left me wary of dating within the industry, but meeting people outside it proved equally challenging. How do you explain to someone with a normal job why you need to attend 3 private views in one evening? Growing up in Manchester had left me with a healthy skepticism of London's dating scene, but my flatmate Olivia, a fashion buyer for Selfridges, insisted that dating apps were the only way to meet people in London who weren't either in art or finance. After yet another lonely Sunday wandering through Columbia Road Flower Market, I finally downloaded Bumble. Setting up my profile felt like curating a mini exhibition of myself, each photo carefully selected to show different facets. One at a gallery opening I'd organized, another exploring street art in Brick Lane, one at Tate Modern's latest installation, and a casual shot enjoying Sunday roast at the Marksman. I debated how much to reveal about my role in the art world, knowing it could attract the wrong kind of attention. The initial matches were predictable. Bankers from Canary Wharf trying to prove their cultural sophistication, tech startup founders wanting to collaborate, and artists hoping to get their work shown. I was about to give up when his profile appeared. Daniel Clark, 30, architectural photographer, with a portfolio that showed genuine talent rather than just aesthetic imitation. His bio referenced obscure art movements, and included a quote from John Berger that made me pause. When he mentioned documenting London's disappearing brutalist architecture, I felt that rare spark of genuine Our first messages centered around the changing face of London's architecture and art scene. He knew about hidden galleries in Peckham, and had strong opinions about the commercialization of street art in Shoreditch. It felt like finally meeting someone who understood both the creative and commercial sides of the art world. Our conversations evolved from art theory to personal experiences. Daniel had studied at the Royal College of Art before turning to architectural photography. His work documenting London's changing skyline had been featured in several respected publications, and his Instagram showed a keen eye for the city's overlooked spaces. We discovered shared perspectives on gentrification, the role of public art, and the challenges of maintaining artistic integrity in a commercial world. His knowledge of London's art history was impressive, and he seemed to know about every exhibition I mentioned, often offering insights I hadn't considered. After 2 weeks of increasingly engaging conversations about everything from brutalism to Brexit's impact on the arts, we planned to meet at God's Own Junkyard in Walthamstow. It was the perfect suggestion. Off the beaten path but iconic in London's art world, God's Own Junkyard was a riot of neon and color, the perfect backdrop for a first meeting. Daniel was already there when I arrived, camera in hand, looking every bit the serious photographer in his black turtleneck and vintage leather jacket. His knowledge of neon art was impressive, and he shared fascinating stories about the venue's history that even I didn't know. The conversation flowed naturally from art to life, and we decided to continue the date at a nearby pub. He spoke passionately about his current project documenting London's disappearing music venue, showing me some of his work on his laptop. The images were stunning, capturing a side of London that was rapidly vanishing. What struck me most was his ability to discuss art without the pretension that often plagued the London scene. He seemed genuinely interested in my curatorial work, asking thoughtful questions about upcoming exhibitions and sharing interesting perspectives on the artists we were featuring. The following weeks were filled with perfectly curated dates that showed an intimate knowledge of London's art world. Daniel seemed to know about every private view, every pop-up exhibition, and every hidden artistic space. He took me to places I'd never discovered, despite working in the industry for years. But slowly, discrepancies began to surface. He would mention being at events I knew hadn't happened. His supposed connections with galleries didn't check out when I discreetly asked around. At first, I dismissed these as simple misunderstandings, but the inconsistencies started accumulating. More disturbing was how he began to know things about upcoming exhibitions that hadn't been announced yet. He would casually mention details about shows I was working on before they were public knowledge. When I questioned this, his explanations became increasingly elaborate and defensive. The breaking point came during preparation for a major exhibition featuring an emerging artist. Suspicious images of the yet-to-be-revealed artwork appeared online, threatening to undermine the entire show. The photos had a familiar style, architectural, detailed, focusing on angles I'd seen before. That same week, several galleries reported attempted break-ins, with nothing stolen but evidence of photography equipment being set up. The connection hit me when I recognized one of Daniel's photographs of a supposedly demolished building. It was still standing, but the angle made it appear destroyed. A deeper investigation revealed that his supposed portfolio was a carefully constructed fiction, combining stolen images and manipulated photographs. His knowledge of the art world came from methodically studying gallery security systems under the guise of architectural photography. The truth emerged during the installation of our new exhibition. Daniel appeared unexpectedly at the gallery after hours, his camera bag bulging with more than just photography equipment. When confronted, his artistic persona cracked, revealing someone who had been using London's art scene as cover for a sophisticated art theft operation. "You really think anything in this world is original?" he sneered, his carefully constructed identity falling away. "Every piece here is just a copy of something else, repackaged for rich collectors. I'm just cutting out the middleman." Police, already alerted by suspicious activity, arrived to find detailed plans of multiple galleries and evidence linking him to a series of art thefts across Europe. The investigation uncovered a network of fake identities, each crafted to infiltrate different artistic communities. He had been documenting gallery layouts, security systems, and artwork locations under the pretense of architectural photography, planning heists that would have devastated London's emerging art scene. The aftermath sent shockwaves through London's art community. Galleries scrambled to review their security protocols, and the easy access that had characterized the scene's openness was replaced with a new wariness. My role in uncovering the plot led to changes in how galleries vetted photographers and documented artwork. I moved the gallery's operations to a new location in Bermondsey, no longer comfortable in the space he had so thoroughly documented. My curatorial work now included stringent security measures, and I became known for my expertise in protecting emerging artists' work. Speaking at industry events about my experience helped others identify similar schemes. It's been 18 months since that rainy night when everything unraveled. I still find myself studying gallery visitors more carefully, wondering if their interest in installation photos is genuine or something more sinister. The London art scene is smaller than it appears, and word traveled fast. My story became a warning at industry events, leading to better security practices across the community. Every time I pass God's Own Junkyard or walk through Shoreditch's street art-covered alleys, I'm reminded of how vulnerability can masquerade as artistic understanding if you're using dating apps in London's creative scene. Remember, the art world might seem open and welcoming, but some people study its openness just to exploit it. These days, I still curate exhibitions and even use dating apps occasionally. But with a sharper eye for authenticity, London's art scene remains vibrant and exciting. But I've learned that someone's cultural knowledge, no matter how impressive, isn't always what it seems. In a city where art and commerce constantly intersect, it's crucial to remember that not every photographer is capturing images for the right reasons. The fog rolled in over Twin Peaks as I made my way home from another marathon coding session at my startup's Soma office. As a senior software engineer specializing in AI and machine learning, I'd gotten used to the intense work culture of San Francisco's tech scene. I'm Anita Desai, 28, living the stereotypical SF tech life, a slightly overpriced apartment in Hayes Valley, a job that consumed most of my waking hours, and enough stock options to keep me hopeful about the future. After graduating from Stanford's CEAS program 3 years ago, I jumped straight into the startup world, building recommendation algorithms for a promising fintech company. The work was challenging and rewarding, but the infamous San Francisco work-life balance meant my personal life had taken a back seat. My last relationship ended when my ex-boyfriend's startup got acquired, and he moved to Austin, claiming San Francisco had become too insular. The San Francisco dating scene was a unique challenge. A city where every conversation eventually turned to tech, funding rounds, or the latest startup drop. Most of my colleagues were either married to their jobs or part of the same incestuous dating pool of tech workers who all seemed to have dated each other at some point. Growing up in a traditional Indian family in Fremont had made me somewhat skeptical of dating apps. But my best friend Rachel, a product manager at Google, insisted they were the only way to meet people outside our immediate tech bubble. After another lonely weekend debugging code and ordering delivery from Burma Superstar, I finally downloaded a new dating app called AlgoMatch that claimed to use advanced AI for better compatibility matching. Setting up my profile felt like optimizing a machine learning model, each variable carefully tuned for maximum performance, photos that showed different aspects of my life, one at a tech conference where I'd spoken, another hiking in Muir Woods, one enjoying dim sum in Chinatown, and a casual shot at Dolores Park. I debated how much to reveal about my AI expertise, knowing it could attract unwanted attention from tech bros trying to recruit me. The initial matches were predictable. Founders looking for technical co-founders, crypto enthusiasts wanting to explain blockchain to me, and engineers whose social skills seemed limited to discussing system architecture. I was about to delete the app when his profile appeared. Ryan Chen, 31, AI ethics researcher at a prestigious think tank, with thoughtful posts about the societal implications of artificial intelligence. His profile showed genuine intellectual curiosity, rather than the usual Silicon Valley buzzword bingo. When he commented on one of my published papers about bias in machine learning algorithm, I felt that rare spark of genuine connection. Our first messages centered around ethical AI development and the future of technology. He seemed to understand both the technical and philosophical aspects of the field, offering insights that challenged my thinking. When he mentioned his research on preventing algorithmic discrimination, it felt like finding someone who shared both my professional interests and personal values. Our conversations evolved naturally from technical discussions to personal experiences. Ryan had done his PhD at MIT before moving to San Francisco to work on AI ethics. His knowledge of the field was impressive, and he seemed to have connections with many of the leading researchers. We discovered shared concerns about the direction of AI development and the need for better safety protocol. His LinkedIn profile showed an impressive career trajectory, and his Medium blog featured thoughtful articles about responsible tech development. After 2 weeks of engaging conversations, we planned to meet at the California Academy of Sciences nightlife event, a perfect blend of science and socializing. The Academy was buzzing with its Thursday night crowd, the perfect mix of tech workers and science enthusiasts. Ryan arrived exactly on time, dressed in the Silicon Valley uniform of expensive casual wear. His knowledge of AI was even more impressive in person, and he shared fascinating insights about projects I knew were still under wraps at major tech companies. We moved from exhibit to exhibit, discussing everything from quantum computing to bioethics. He seemed to know an unusual amount about the latest developments in AI security, including some projects that weren't public knowledge. At the time, I attributed this to his extensive network, and the evening ended with plans to meet again, this time at a private tech meetup he organized. Everything felt perfect, perhaps too perfect for someone who understood my work and interests so completely. The following weeks were filled with dates that showed an intimate knowledge of both tech and my personal interests. Ryan seemed to know about every AI conference, every research breakthrough, and every new development in the field. He took me to exclusive tech events I didn't even know existed. But gradually, things began to feel off. He would reference details about my work that I hadn't shared. He knew about internal projects at my company before they were announced. When I questioned these things, his explanations became increasingly complex and technical, always just plausible enough to quiet my doubts. I started noticing small inconsistencies in his stories about his research work. Conferences he claimed to have attended had no record of his participation. Papers he mentioned working on didn't exist in any academic database. The breaking point came during a security audit at my company. Someone had been attempting to access our AI development servers using sophisticated social engineering techniques. The attempts had come from various locations around San Francisco, coffee shops and co-working spaces where Ryan and I had met. That same week, several other AI researchers in my network reported suspicious attempts to gain access to their work. The pattern was always the same. Someone who had gained their trust through detailed knowledge of their research, gradually gathering information about security protocols and access points. A deeper investigation into Ryan's background revealed disturbing inconsistencies. His think tank didn't exist beyond a sophisticated web presence. His published papers were clever reorganizations of others' research. Even his profile photos showed subtle signs of AI generation, something I should have noticed given my expertise in the field. The truth emerged during a planned meeting at the Computer History Museum in Mountain View. Ryan had suggested it for a date, not knowing I had already alerted security. When confronted with evidence of his deception, his carefully constructed persona cracked. "You really thought you were the only one who could build learning algorithms?" he asked, his voice cold and clinical. "Every piece of information you share online, every interaction, every preference, it's all training data. I just built a better model." The investigation revealed a sophisticated operation, using AI to create false identities and gather intelligence on AI researchers, and Ryan, or whatever his real name was, had been using dating apps to target specialists in AI development, gathering information for what appeared to be state-sponsored technology theft. The aftermath hit the Bay Area tech community hard. Companies strengthened their security protocol, and the open collaboration that had characterized the AI research community was replaced with new layers of verification and caution. My role in uncovering the operation led to speaking engagements about security risks in the AI community. I moved to a different apartment and switched to a role focusing on AI security, using my experience to help protect other researchers from similar schemes. The incident changed how I viewed both technology and trust. The very algorithms I helped develop had been used to create a nearly perfect match that was nothing but a carefully constructed lie. It's been 2 years since that day at the Computer History Museum. I still work in AI, but with a deeper understanding of its potential for both innovation and manipulation. The San Francisco tech scene is smaller than it seems, and my story became a cautionary tale at security conferences, leading to new protocols for information sharing in the AI community. Every time I pass through SOMA or attend a tech event, I'm reminded of how vulnerability can hide behind technological sophistication. If you're using dating apps in San Francisco, especially in the tech industry, remember, someone who seems to perfectly understand your work might be analyzing more than just your compatibility. These days, I help other companies protect their AI research. And yes, I still use dating apps. But with AI detection tools of my own design running in the background, the San Francisco dating scene hasn't gotten any easier. But I've learned that, in a city built on algorithms and pattern recognition, not all patterns are what they seem. The winter wind whipped down Michigan Avenue as I hurried from my social media marketing job at a downtown agency to catch the Red Line home. I'm Jessica Martinez, 26, working as a digital content strategist, managing social media accounts for some of Chicago's biggest brands. My life looked perfect on Instagram, a cozy apartment in Lakeview, a creative job in the Loop, and enough followers to qualify as a micro-influencer in Chicago's digital marketing scene. After graduating from DePaul's marketing program 2 years ago, I'd built a reputation for creating viral campaigns and understanding social media algorithms. My personal brand was carefully curated, showing the perfect mix of professional success and Chicago lifestyle. Brunches at Wildberry, summer days at North Avenue Beach, and artistic shots of the city's architecture. Growing up in Pilsen had taught me the value of authentic community, but my job required me to live much of my life online. My last relationship ended when my ex couldn't handle the public nature of my work. He never understood why I needed to document everything for my personal brand. Dating in Chicago's digital marketing world meant everyone already knew everything about you before the first date. My best friend Maria, who ran influencer partnerships at another agency, suggested I try Facebook dating. "You already manage everyone's Facebook accounts anyway," she joked during one of our wine nights at ABA. "Might as well use it for yourself." After another lonely evening scheduling posts for clients, I decided to give it a try. Building my dating profile felt natural. After all, I optimized social media profiles for a living. Each photo was strategically chosen. One at a Cubs game, showing Chicago pride. Another at the Bean, tourist-friendly but classic. One at a River North rooftop bar, social life. And a professional headshot from a recent marketing conference, career success. The first wave of matches was underwhelming. Social media managers trying to network, wannabe influencers looking for collaboration, and marketing bros whose entire personality was their job title. I was about to abandon the platform when I received a message that stood out. Michael Sullivan, 30, digital privacy consultant, with a minimal but intriguing social media presence. His profile showed genuine personality, rather than carefully crafted personal branding. When he commented on one of my articles about social media privacy concerns, it felt like finding someone who understood both sides of the digital world. Our initial messages discussed the balance between privacy and online presence. He seemed to understand the challenges of maintaining a public persona while protecting personal information. His insights about social media algorithms and privacy settings were impressive, offering perspectives I hadn't considered despite my expertise. Our conversations deepened beyond social media strategy to personal experiences. Michael had worked for several major tech companies before starting his own consulting firm. His knowledge of digital platforms was extensive, and he shared fascinating insights about data protection that seemed valuable for my work. His Facebook profile was oddly sparse for someone in tech, which he explained as practicing what he preached about digital privacy. Our connection moved to WhatsApp, where he seemed more comfortable sharing details about his work and life. After 2 weeks of engaging conversations, we planned to meet at the Aviary. He'd somehow known it was on my Chicago bucket list. The Aviary was packed with its usual Friday night crowd of young professionals. Michael arrived precisely on time, dressed in business casual, that somehow looked both expensive and understated. His knowledge of digital privacy was even more impressive in person. and he shared concerning insights about how much personal information was publicly available through social media. We moved from cocktails to dinner at Girl and the Goat. He'd managed to get a last-minute reservation, which should have been impossible. Throughout the evening, he demonstrated an uncanny knowledge of Chicago's tech scene and seemed to know everyone who mattered in digital marketing. The date ended with plans to meet again. This time at a private tech meetup he organized. Everything felt perfect. Perhaps too perfect for someone who understood both my industry and interests so completely. The following weeks showed Michael's deep understanding of my digital life. He seemed to know about every event I was interested in, every restaurant I'd saved on Yelp, every LinkedIn connection I made. At first, I attributed this to his expertise in digital privacy and data mining, but things began to feel unsettling. He would reference posts I'd made on private accounts. He knew about client meetings I hadn't mentioned. My friends started receiving friend requests from people who seemed connected to him, but the profiles felt off. Too new, too perfect. I noticed changes in my social media accounts. Subtle at first, like posts being marked as seen when I hadn't checked them, or messages showing as read before I opened them. When I mentioned these oddities, his explanations became increasingly technical and evasive. The breaking point came during a major client campaign launch. Someone had accessed our agency's social media management platform, viewing upcoming posts and client strategies. The access came from various Chicago IP addresses, coffee shops and co-working spaces where Michael and I had met that same week. Several other social media managers in my network reported unusual activity on their accounts. The pattern was consistent. Their personal data had been mined to create detailed profiles, which were then used to gain access to their professional accounts. A deeper investigation revealed disturbing patterns. Michael's consulting firm didn't exist beyond a sophisticated web presence. His client testimonials were from stolen profiles. Even his social media history showed signs of being artificially constructed. Old posts that had been backdated. Connections that seemed to appear and disappear. The truth unraveled during a planned meeting at Cyberpool, a tech-focused bar in River North. I'd arranged for cybersecurity experts to be present, having already gathered evidence of his digital manipulation. When confronted, his carefully constructed persona shattered. "Social media managers are the perfect targets," he said, his voice cold and calculated. "You have the keys to everything. Brands, influencers, ad accounts. You share your whole lives online, making it so easy to become exactly what you're looking for." The investigation revealed a sophisticated social engineering operation, targeting social media professionals across major cities. Michael had been using dating apps and social networks to gather intelligence on digital marketers, accessing their client accounts and stealing campaign strategies for competitor brands. The aftermath sent shockwaves through Chicago's digital marketing community. Agencies revamped their security protocols, and the open collaboration that had characterized our industry was replaced with careful verification processes. My experience led to a new role focusing on social media security and privacy protection. I moved to a different neighborhood and completely rebuilt my digital presence, using my experience to help other professionals protect themselves from similar schemes. The incident fundamentally changed how I viewed social media and online relationships. The very platforms I used to connect with others had been weaponized against me. It's been 18 months since that night in River North. I still work in digital marketing, but with a deeper understanding of the vulnerabilities we create by sharing our lives online. Chicago's marketing community is smaller than it seems, and my story became a warning at industry conferences, leading to new standards for social media account security. Every time I scroll through Facebook or post on Instagram, I'm reminded of how digital footprints can be used against us if you're using social media for dating, especially in the marketing industry. Remember, someone who seems to perfectly understand your online life might be analyzing more than just your profile. These days, I help other marketers protect their digital presence, and yes, I still use social media, but with strict privacy settings and a new appreciation for keeping some things offline. Chicago's dating scene hasn't gotten any easier, but I've learned that in a world where everyone's life is public, sometimes the most attractive profiles are the ones that seem too good to be true.